So Socrates takes the voice of the jury and he has them propose a question to him. It says, Socrates, for now we will not obey Anytus. We will let you go, but on this condition, that you no longer spend time in this investigation of or philosophize. And if you are caught still doing this, you will die. If you would let me go, then, as I said, on these conditions, I would say to you, well, what's he going to say? No. Right? Is this man going to get himself off by saying this? He says, if you give me the choice to live unfree, not philosophizing, or die, I'm going to take the choice of die. And he puts it right in the jury's face here. He says, if you would let me go, then, as I said, on these conditions, I would say to you, I, men of Athens, salute you. I love you. Does he really? But I will obey the God rather than you. Now he claims, in a sense, to be so pious that he will only follow the God, but not them. But who is the God? Is the God the oracle of Delphi that he said he's going to refute? Or is the God the daimonia? Right? I think the God that he listens to is the daimonia. But what is the daimonia? It's a voice in his head. It's a voice in his head. And we might even make an argument that he's really saying, I'm going to follow my own conscience rather than what you dictate to me. Now, some of you are going to say that's a heroic position, and some of you might say, this man should get in line. Right? And as long as I breathe, and I am able to, I will certainly not stop philosophizing. He's a warrior for philosophy. He's willing to die. And I will exhort you and explain this to whomever of you I happen to meet. And I will speak just the sort of things I am accustomed to. Best of men, you are an Athenian from the city that is greatest and best reputed for wisdom and strength. And you are not ashamed that you care for having as much money as possible and reputation and honor, but that you neither care for nor thought to prudence and truth and how your soul will be best possible. What is he saying? You guys have great reputation, but your reputation is based on wealth and power. He says, what about your soul? What about your soul? He continues, know well then that the God orders this, and I suppose that until now no greater God has arisen for you in the city than my service. A greater good has arisen in the city than my service to the God. He is putting this God above Zeus, above the traditional pantheon, and above everything that the citizens see as the common interest of the city. For I go around and do nothing but persuade you, both younger and older, not to care for your bodies and money before, nor as vehemently as how your soul will be best possible. I say, not from money does virtue come, but from virtue comes money and all the other good things for human beings, both privately and publicly. If then I corrupt the young by saying these things, they may be harmful. Now, whether he corrupts the young is all where you stand, whether you're from the point of view of the city or from the point of view of truth. But if someone asserts that what I say is other than this, he speaks nonsense, with a view to things, men of Athens, I would say either obey Anytus or not, and either let me go or not, since I would not do otherwise, not even if I were going to die many times. So he draws the line here. And what's going to happen? He's going to be found guilty, and then he's going to give a provocative speech again about how everything he's done in life actually benefits them. And what's the argument? It's not he who has corrupted the youth. It's all the powerful figures. The politicians have corrupted the youth, and he is the bringer of the cure by focusing on their souls. It's a total role reversal. He goes into court, and instead of defending himself, he accuses the whole society of being corrupt. and that he's been trying to teach them the right way of life, right? The one speaking the truth against the many who believe what they believe, right? Fascinating. So on page 82, the middle paragraph here, he says, "So I, men of Athens, am now far from making a defense speech on my own behalf, as someone might suppose. I do it rather on your behalf. Who's going to hell, right? It's not him, it's them. He's now flipped this whole situation on them to claim that they're the ones who are really corrupt in their souls. And he's been giving them a warning all his life, and they haven't listened. And the proof that he's on trial is only proof of that from his point of view. I do it rather on your behalf, so that you do not do something wrong concerning the gift of the God to you by voting to condemn me. For if you kill me, you will not easily discover another of my sort, who, even if it is rather ridiculous to say, has simply been set upon the city by the God, as though upon a great and well-born horse, who is rather sluggish because of his great size and needs to be awakened by some gadfly." He's a hero in the form of a gadfly, waking them up, stinging their rear ends from their dogmatic slumbers of ignorance and kind of complacency. And what does the horse do with the gadfly? It swings its tail around and tries to swat it, to try to kill it. It shouldn't be surprising to anyone that the jury finds him guilty. After everything he said, it's no surprise at all. He's found guilty, and then what does he say? He has to propose a punishment, and he talks about exile, and he talks about paying a small little fine, and he talks about being feted and given meals at the Prytaneum on pages 90 and 91. And of course, to be given meals at the Prytaneum, this is for a hero. This is for a great contributor to the city, and it all depends on how you view him. But it looks rather absurd, right? And on page 92, he says, I think, really what's on his mind in the way that nobody in a jury trial would, a defendant in a trial. And actually it seems to push them, now that they've already found him guilty, it pushes them to convict him. He says, perhaps then, someone might say, by being silent and keeping quiet, Socrates, weren't you able to live in exile for us? It is hardest of all to persuade some of you about this, for if I say that this is to disobey the God, and that because of this it is impossible to keep quiet, you will not be persuaded by me on the ground that I am being ironic. And on the other hand, if I say that even happens to be a very great good for a human being to make speeches every day about virtue, and the other things about which you hear me conversing and examining both myself and others, and that the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being, not worth living, you will be persuaded by me still less when I say these things. This is the way it is, as I affirm, man, but to persuade you is not easy. He's not even trying. Think about what he's just said. The unexamined life is not worth living. Well, what kind of life are all these people living? They're living the unexamined life. Are they aware that he's just accused them of living a worthless life? Once he said this, it's not surprising that they're going to sentence him to death. And he's sentenced to death, and then he's able to give a kind of, it's no longer a rebuttal speech. So notice that at every successive stage, his tongue gets looser, and he's more direct. And he's been trying to teach them. He has not made a defense speech, per se. What he's tried to do is teach them why his life is what it is, and why it's just. And in a sense, that's the defense speech. And in the remaining pages, up to page 97 here, he says, is death such a bad thing? Right? Is death such a bad thing? Death is an evil of a certain kind, but is it the greatest evil? And it depends on the context and the situation and so on. And he starts talking about the afterlife. Maybe I will go on to be recognized in the afterlife, if not here. And of course, what's the greatest fear for the average person? Death. They don't want to lose the pleasures of life. He seems to clearly have calculated that the loss of his life at this age of 70 on behalf of following this philosophic duty is a great good. And therefore he's totally resigned to it. And he concludes with this last sentence on page 97. But now it is time to go away, I to die, and you to live. Which of us goes to a better thing is unclear to everyone except the God.